Hi, this is Corey Franklin with Remembering the Past, a show where we talk about people who've died recently, who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And tonight we're going to talk about food, glorious food. And we're going to start out with that staple, the bagel. And we're going to start out with Murray Lender. Murray Lender died recently at the age of 81. The bagel was a traditionally Eastern European Jewish food in the 19th century, and a number of Jews had brought the recipe over to the United States, primarily to New York. One of the thousands of Jews who brought the bagel to the United States was Murray Lender's father, Harry. The bagel was a round, crunchy roll with a hole in the middle, and it tasted quite good with cream cheese or occasionally with a little butter, and maybe you would toast it. But again, it was primarily an ethnic food eaten on the East Coast. Their company was located in Connecticut. It was primarily eaten in New York City, migrated out to Chicago. We have a great one on 2E Avenue in Chicago. Jews would take it to places like Cleveland and Los Angeles. It was primarily an East Coast delicacy for Jews. One of the problems with the bagel is that it would get stale quickly. So Murray Lender and his two brothers, Marvin and Sam, decided to expand the company and freeze their bagels. And by freezing their bagels, they were able to make them not only last longer, but they could expand them to a larger market. And after World War II, ethnic food became more popular across the United States, all types of ethnic food, and the bagel was one of the beneficiaries of this trend. So by the late 1960s and early 1970s, the ethnic bagel had become a widespread delicacy across the United States. And of course, with the advent of television, you got television advertising and television marketing. So Murray Lender became a ubiquitous character on television with his commercials. This is Murray Lender promoting his bagel not only to white bread America, but to ethnicities, minorities, and just about anybody who needed a quick breakfast food.
Hi, I'm Murray Lender. I've spent my life baking Lender's bagels. Now, is baking bagels a life's work? Well, it's not so easy baking a bagel that's always crispy on the outside. It's not so easy baking a bagel that's always soft and chewy on the inside. It's not so easy telling people that after all those years of eating toast for breakfast, now there's something better. But it's not so hard either.
Lender's. Since 1927, bakers of better bagels.
Let me tell you, bagels took off after that and they became a breakfast staple. But not only did they become a breakfast staple, they went into direct competition with that other breakfast staple, the donut. And in doing so, they lost the last of their ethnicity. So you'll notice that the trend in the 1980s and 1990s was to take the plain bagel, which for many years had been the bagel that everyone had eaten, and turn it into a competition with the donut. So all of a sudden you got flavored bagels. You got blueberry bagels. You got jalapeno bagels. You got chocolate chip bagels. You got all sorts of bagels for all sorts of tastes for just about everybody. The Lender Company was sold to Kraft, and bagels have become an essentially all-American food. Personally, I still like my bagel slightly toasted with a little bit of cream cheese on it, and plain, of course. But you can't criticize progress, and in less than 100 years, again, bagels have become a food for all Americans. And we have Murray Lender to thank for that. So thank you, Murray Lender. But just between you and me, Murray, I'm still not eating any blueberry bagels. Well, we move from the bagel to another popular food that became a staple in the later half of the 20th century. And this basically hadn't existed before then. It was the energy drink. So we move on to Chaleo Yoodvihya. Chaleo Yoodvihya came from a poor background in Thailand to become one of the world's richest men by essentially inventing the first energy drink, Red Bull. Chaleo died recently at the age of 88, and his story is an amazing one. He came from a poor Chinese immigrant family which migrated to northern Thailand. He never went to school, but he soon moved to Bangkok, where he worked driving buses and trucks before becoming a salesman for a pharmaceutical company. In the mid-1950s and 1960s, he noticed that one of the firm's products was a popular drink with truck drivers and sold particularly well because it gave them energy to drive longer periods of time. It was sort of like what we did with amphetamines back then. But this was just a basic drink. It was a berry-flavored syrupy concoction, and it was essentially caffeine spiked with mysterious additives like taurine, which came from a bull's bile, had a lot of sugar in it to make it more palatable, And he noticed that when he sold it, the truck drivers loved it because, again, it helped them work longer and longer shifts. He called it Krathing Dang, which is translated to Redwater Buffalo. And then in 1982 came the critical moment in his life when he met an Austrian toothpaste salesman called Dietrich Mateschitz. Dietrich Mateschitz had been coming to Thailand for some time, and he found that drinking Krathing Dang had cured his jet lag, and he decided to seek out Chaleo, and the two men became business partners in 1984. Mateschitz renamed the product, adjusted its flavor to suit Western tastes, and put some added fizz in it. They repackaged it in a slim blue and silver container, and they decided to give it a new name that they thought would appeal to Westerners, and the name they gave it was Red Bull, and it became the first energy drink. It first started in Austria. They did an unconventional marketing campaign emphasizing its edginess and maybe its slight hint of danger.
Red Bull gives you wings.
They got extreme sports people to market it, these new sports like motocross and snowboarding, and they introduced it into the United States. At first, it didn't take off, but with the help of television and more importantly, with the help of viral marketing through the internet, it became a huge success in the United States. Red Bull is now the #1 energy drink in the United States. Chaleo Yoodvihya, by the way, became the 205th richest man in the world. He hasn't given any interviews for 30 years, which is why we don't have a clip of him being interviewed, and he didn't speak English anyway. But Red Bull is now a staple in campuses and in bars across the United States. Of course, the drink that was originally intended to give truck drivers more energy has become a recreational drink. So now in clubs and in night spots everywhere, vodka and Red Bull is a staple drink, and I'm sure there are all sorts of other concoctions that those silly kids today use with Red Bull, but it's used for studying, it's used for athletics, and it's used as a recreational drug. There have, of course, been other energy knockoffs since then. It's a huge market. That was inevitable. And Chaleo Yoodvihya is the man responsible for that. A simple duck farmer from Thailand who built the market for energy drinks in the United States and in the Western world with his concoction, Red Bull. As we say goodbye to Chaleo Yoodvihya, we close tonight with one of the men who revolutionized what I guess would be our precursor to energy drinks, coffee. And we're going to close with Samuel Glazer. Samuel Glazer died recently at the age of 89, and he was the man who gave us one of our first and most popular automatic drip coffee makers, Mr. Coffee. Samuel Glazer was a nice Jewish boy from Cleveland, and along with a nice Italian boy from Cleveland, Vincent Marotta, they solved one of the big problems with coffee in the United States. Before them, the way that people drank coffee at home was to percolate it. So people used these old coffee percolators. You could ask your grandparents about them. They were these sort of steel things that would allow the coffee to be boiled through water, and after a couple of minutes you could see the coffee through a little visible bulb at the top. They were pretty low tech. They made the coffee smell real good, but it didn't always taste real good because it was in those steel containers. The alternative was simply to pour boiling water on freeze-dried coffee, which didn't really taste very good. So you had your choice of bitter coffee that smelled good through a percolator or freeze-dried coffee which didn't taste very good. What Samuel Glazer and Vincent Marotta did was they figured out how to build a Mr. Coffee machine. And that was a plastic machine where water entered the electric heating element at the top, trickled into the coffee grounds into a disposable paper filter before emptying into a glass pot resting on another heating element that kept it warm. To avoid the bitterness that you got with the percolators, they only heated the brew to about 200 degrees, and they introduced it in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And as with Red Bull and with the bagel, they used television and advertising to popularize their product, which didn't catch on right away. And they used a pitchman, and they used one of the most famous pitchmen of the second half of the 20th century. He was a baseball hero from the 1950s, one of the most recognizable names in America, but he hadn't been really in the public eye. It was Joe DiMaggio, of course, the great Yankee center fielder from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And he had been married to Marilyn Monroe for a brief time in the 1950s for about 9 months. They were divorced, which prompted, I think it was Oscar Levant to say, further proof a man can't be a success at 2 national pastimes. And that was the last we'd heard about him for a decade and a half. He was reintroduced into the American psyche by Simon and Garfunkel. I don't know what prompted Samuel Glazer and Vincent Marotta to hire Joe DiMaggio, but perhaps it was this song that was popular as they were trotting out Mr. Coffee.
Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? One nation turns its lonely eyes to you. Ooh, what's that you say, Mrs. Robinson? Joe has left and gone away. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey.
Brief digression, a little background on that song. Of course, it was originally not supposed to be Mrs. Robinson. It was supposed to be Mrs. Roosevelt. But Mike Nichols asked Paul Simon to change it for the movie The Graduate. Paul Simon's favorite baseball player, by the way, was Joe DiMaggio's replacement in center field, Mickey Mantle. And Mickey Mantle felt hurt when he heard that Paul Simon didn't use him in the song. And he asked him why he didn't use him in the song instead of Joe DiMaggio. And they were sort of rivals, by the way. And Paul Simon just simply said to him, syllables, Mick, syllables. And Joe DiMaggio also confronted Paul Simon. He didn't like the song originally. He said, what do you mean, where have I gone? I'm still here. And Paul Simon had to explain to Joe DiMaggio that it was a metaphorical thing. Well, it was certainly a metaphorical thing, and if it did help Samuel Glazer pick Joe DiMaggio as the spokesman for Mr. Coffee, it meant a whole lot of money for Joe DiMaggio and brought him back into the public eye. Here is the ubiquitous commercial that made Mr. Coffee a household product throughout the United States and North America.
Here's Joe DiMaggio.
These are Mr. Coffee filters. This is Mr. Coffee, precision coffee brewing system. This filter was scientifically designed to extract only the finest qualities from your coffee, even if your coffee maker isn't the genuine Mr. Coffee. Our filter filters out oils, sediment, and bitterness. Filters in great coffee flavor. Mr. Coffee filters. You'll find them at supermarkets, department stores, fine stores everywhere.
Well, Samuel Glazer was behind that promotion campaign. We have him to thank for Mr. Coffee. So we have 3 true American success stories about food. The Bagel, Red Bull, and Mr. Coffee. Murray Lender, Chaleo Yoodvihya, and Samuel Glazer. I'm going to close on that note tonight. I'd like to thank my producer, Sid Tepps. And we're going to close with a little bit of food song. And the food song is from the musical Oliver, sung by the children's choir in Oliver. It's Food, Glorious Food.
Food, glorious.